they are. And when I look across the whole cabinet, I see not one businessman sitting at the cabinet table. And that's the problem, because you don't understand business. You don't understand the value of a pound. You don't understand. But Minister Riley is making the business out of his profession, yes.
Through the chair, Deputy.
Yeah. Through the chair, I'm going to ask them questions. What is the impact? What will the impact be on the ordinary working man and woman in the street? And the Labour Party might ask that. They're supposed to represent them. At one time, the old Labour Party did, certainly. As Social Justice Ireland, what are their feelings about this? And why have you proved this against any kind of a measurement? No, you haven't. You're in a spin with your spin doctors. You didn't know what time you were coming in today. I saw where the ECB noted your actions last night. Just noted it, if you wouldn't mind. And I don't know what kind of note they take of you over there, because they don't treat you with reality. Because I have met the Troika on 3 occasions, and they don't treat you with reality, because you said one thing before the election only 2 years ago, and you're doing the exact opposite, so you're confused. And they know that you're a pushover, the whole lot of you. That's sad. What effect will it have on the struggling and the people struggling to pay their mortgages, or indeed those in negative equity? What impact is it going to have those people? And they are in your constituencies and your clinics on a daily basis. What impact is it going to have on the homeless and those on social welfare and the people that you claim to represent? Small businesses who can't get credit, are they going to go into the bank tomorrow or next Monday and be able to get the credit that they weren't able to get today or yesterday? No, they're not. There's no change in banking policy. There's no change in getting this economy moving, which you promised that you would. It's austerity on top of austerity, and the people cannot accept it. And I tell you, the people won't accept it. And as I said, the grin will be gone off your face when you meet and go back to your constituencies. I got caught here once, clapping for a measure in the Department of Finance. That's why it was low to be clapping again, because when you get the small print, and when you see what the deal is, it's not a deal. It's a cop-out, Taoiseach. It's plainly a letdown to both yourselves, your public representatives behind you, your parties, and above all the Irish people. And we had to fight, and we had our chance. And we thought from all the noises you were making in the last couple of weeks that we were going to get something of a seismic deal. But we got nothing. Absolutely not a shilling written down off of the debt, the legacy debt. And as I said, not one, last night I said it again, not one banker, not one accountant, not one person has been properly arraigned, and everybody's entitled to their day in court and to justice. Not one of them has been brought before the courts fully charged yet. 2 or 3 years later, who are you protecting? That's what I want to ask. Who are you protecting? Or what mighty organisation are you protecting up there and high? Who are you protecting? And I asked the same question of the last government. Who are they protecting? Because why are the ordinary people bedevilled and children born and said today wake up 25 years when they should be coming out and graduating from college, and they're going to have a noose around their necks? They were promised lots of things by Minister Quinn in the last election, but why are they our children, our grandchildren, our great-grandchildren and future generations? I hate saying it, Taoiseach. I'd go back and ask the late Michael Collins what he thinks of this deal. We know the answer. We know the answer. Or Liam Lynch, or any of the founder members, or any of the 1916 people. I'll ask them. Stand up. All right,
yeah. Order, please.
Sorry, I didn't hear you, Pat.
Deputy McGrath, yeah, through the chair. Through the chair.
So, thank you very much. Great crack. It's all great crack, yeah? You're the crack in the Labour Party, and you're the man who said that in elections, we say things in elections, we just make promises and the people won't mind. But they're waiting for you. They're waiting for you. They're waiting for you on the land grass. You might be getting out of pension, but the lads won't be out in pension. They know when they'll be facing the music. But no, on a serious note,
could we just, please?
It's so sad.
Deputy McGrath.
It's so sad that you got one of the finest mandates that any government ever got, and you were reneged totally on it, and you have been an utter failure to the people who elected you. And that's a sad legacy to leave behind you. I know you inherited a lot of trouble, and you're talking about that every day you come in here, but it's time to move on. You're in charge now. And I can tell you, Minister Shatter as well, you're in charge now. And the 10 more Garda stations you're going to close in 10 minutes. That's the contempt you treat the Gardaí with. It's unbelievable. It's time to move on. And look, we are a proud people. We want to pay our way, but we want to pay the debt that we owe, not the massive billions of debt that was borrowed and lended in here by bankers, rogue bankers and rogue speculators. unsecured bondholders that you were going to burn tarnish them. And where are they? They're warming their backsides to the fires, as they are. And you're rubbing their belly with a bit of nice gasoline. That's what you're doing. And we know where the copper donations that come from. So I want to finish up and say that this is an abject failure.
Please.
And we'll have a full debate. What's that, Minister? You leave the Commissioner waiting for another hour for a meeting, will you?
No, Deputy.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, I mean, he treats everybody with the same disdain, even the Garda Commissioner.
Through the chair.
So if I could finish, please, I will. Just want to say, in closing, that it's a sad day for Ireland, that we have, again, burdened our people and future generations, God knows how long, with a debt that they didn't incur, or their parents didn't incur, or their grandparents didn't incur. The fat cats, and indeed the regulators, both at EU level and Irish level, they allowed it to happen. The money be shoveled in here when they knew the economy was overheating, and when we knew it wasn't, and they have walked away scot-free, in spite of the mandate that was given to the government over there to deal with this. That's what they sold themselves on. So I say to you, Taoiseach, I am so disappointed. And you can laugh away all you want and talk. I'm so disappointed, but we're used to disappointment from you, Taoiseach. We had it yesterday in relation to the Maglins. We have it every day since you come in here. So we're going to have a debate next week, and we look forward to it. And I look forward to my colleagues making realistic points and honest points. But the bottom line fact is that this debt is crippling. It's not our debt. We've got no write-off. It's an abject failure.
That concludes the contributions. And we resume now in a few moments on the water services bill. Sorry. Please. Order, please. Please, Deputy Richard Boyd-Barrett. Deputy Boyd-Barrett, please.
On a point of order, yes. Taoiseach, this is, by any standards, a very significant
What's the point of order? Please.
Can I ask the Taoiseach? Can I ask the Taoiseach whether he's willing to answer questions to the House on the announcement he's just made?
There's no provision for that. There's no provision. Deputy Higgins. Sir.
Sorry, there is a serious point here. When the Taoiseach spoke, he said that if the Dáil wanted, he would put a motion in regard to this issue to the Dáil, as to see whether the Dáil agreed that not just children yet unborn, but their children in turn should carry the Anglo-toxic debt. Now, he didn't say what his proposal was.
I think matter for the whips, Deputy.
Can somebody from the government tell us, for a change, when such a motion will come forward, and when a debate will be afforded in Dáil Éireann, so that we can repudiate this disgraceful deed?
Thank you, but that's a matter for the whips. I'm sure the whips will take that matter up of the debate. Yeah? The Chief Whip, Deputy Polkio.
There will be a full debate, as the Taoiseach said earlier in his speech. There will be a motion on Tuesday, and we will sit Monday or Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, for as long as the opposition and the government want to debate the issue.
That answers that. Now we resume on the water services bill. Deputy Claire Daly has 10 minutes remaining. Thanks very much. Now, could I call on Deputy Claire Daly to resume the debate? And Deputy Daly has 10 minutes remaining.
Yeah, thanks, Ciarán Comhairle. I mean, obviously the whole thing is really a bit farcical at this stage, and I don't know why the government and the whips haven't maybe adjourned business or allowed us to discuss the key issue of the day so that we could attend to these matters, which are in many ways equally important and will have as long-standing implications, but clearly are being overshadowed by the other events at the moment. But just maybe briefly to conclude with a few points. Clearly, the key plank of this legislation is to allow the government to introduce domestic water meters, and no doubt it will be surrounded by the range of publicity and spin, I suppose, that this is going to be a great step forward in terms of water conservation in Ireland. I think it is a complete and utter joke. You've already said earlier that you intend to begin a programme of introducing these meters later in the year, and I think in terms of and in the context of the legislation with regard to the property tax, where you envisage a scenario having pushed through that draconian legislation, that you envisage that revenue will be capable at that stage of having put their hands in the pockets of workers, social welfare recipients and pensioners to take that property tax from their wages, and around the same time later in the year you'll be visiting houses and estates to install water meters. What a recipe for an absolute and utter social explosion of resistance to this measure, and I think it's patently obvious that it is going to be resisted the length and breadth of the country, because ordinary people aren't stupid. They know full well that a domestic water meter does not conserve water, and all of the research and all of the studies show absolutely that if you introduce them, then temporarily and initially it may succeed in a reduction of around 10% consumption. So let's look at that. All of the analysis, Engineers Ireland and everybody else, states that figure. So best case scenario, a 10% reduction in domestic water supply. Now, I think we would all of us agree that there are very few people in this state who go out to work in the morning, leave the taps running and say, do you know what, I couldn't care less, I think I'll leave the water running for the day. Does that mean that all of us could do more to conserve water? Of course we could. But simple measures of education are sufficient to deal with that. We make the point that our children can do this a lot better than us. They're much better educated at turning the tap off when you're brushing your teeth and all the very rest of it. Education measures will assist, and they do with our young people, and we can all do better. You don't need a charge or a meter to do that. A simple education programme would do that. The key reason why there is excess water used in domestic properties is because of the way in which they were designed, because of the lack of in older properties of dual flush toilets, the fact that Irish toilets consume vastly more quantities of water than a similar unit would in another European country, the lack of rainwater harvesting, the lack of using grey water facilities and so on. Measures which, if implemented, could absolutely conserve and reduce water consumption by about 50%. So in actual fact, if you were serious about reducing domestic water consumption, a programme to bring in such conservation measures and some grant system would be far more effective than an actual meter on a property, because domestic water consumption is only a minority of the overall water supply that is used in this state. And we have to go back to the big picture of unaccounted for water and leaks. And let's look at the figures in that. The figure across the local authorities in 08 was 43.44% of treated water, in 09 44.5%, and in 2010 42.3%. An absolute and utter crime that treated water is going back down into the ground. And if you look at the figures in all the major urban areas in 2010, Cork City, you had a leakage rate of 55%, Dublin City 46.36%, Dunleary Rathdown 28%, South Dublin top of the range, just over 20%. Fingal, 30%, haven't been better previously. Galway City, 48%. Waterford, 47%. Limerick, 57%. Donegal and Kerry, 53% and 59% respectively. Absolutely shocking figures. If we want to conserve water and save money, that's where the investment has to go. And the government has made a huge propaganda argument about the jobs to install water water meters? Well, you would have far more jobs created if you put crews to work at fixing the leakage in the mains water. And we're not just talking off the top of our head on that. The studies and the works that have been done by local authorities over the years prove that that is the case, and prove in actual fact that that can have a far greater input on the amount of water saved than any introduction of water meters, because domestic water consumption in Ireland is 16% of the overall supply. So if you bring in measures which allow you to conserve maybe 10%, slightly more, of the domestic water supply, the only reduction you're getting is about 1% of the overall supply. And you contrast that with measures, if you fix the mains and you could reduce figures in the likes of Dublin City, which says a 41%, down to 30% or 25%, or as South Dublin has, down to 20%, you're talking about reductions and savings of volumes of about 20%. And that's really where we should go. And so even those studies alone show the fallacy of introducing domestic water meters, and the dogs on the streets know the reason why you're doing it. The only benefit and the only logic in the, I suppose, the enormous cost of putting a meter on each property is so you can measure it, so you can charge for it, and so in the future so you can sell it off and privatise it. And it doesn't matter whatever commitments are given here today, and even if we believe you and think that you're great, it doesn't stop your predecessor doing it afterwards. And I think that is why this will be so strenuously resisted. I have to say I do take issue at the fact of the so-called jobs that are being created, and indeed the over-reliance on private operators in terms of installing meters. I mean, the Minister should be, and I'm sure he is, aware of the very clear evidence of a number of sectors in private construction, groundworks contractors, doing work which has been inadequate during the boom. We see a lot of bad developers who left leaking pipes, water mains all over the country, inadequately connected and so on. What assurances do we have that the Minister is going to check the records of the companies who will be engaged in these works, and that they, if they had been involved in other works before where we're left with a legacy, that they will not get the contracts this time round? I think that's a hugely important issue which needs to be addressed. And it comes back to the big picture, really, that the expertise exists at local authority level. We could employ thousands of workers directly in a direct labour scheme that would ensure a fixing of the mains, but also a programme of enticing householders to conserve water in their homes by implementing the measures which would allow water consumption to be reduced. I think it is an absolute scandal as well, and makes a mockery of...
You know, we have 2 minutes left.
Thank you, Karen Corla. The situation, the fact that we have schools paying for water all over the country, the fact that there isn't a proper programme of rainwater harvesting on public buildings and so on, these all expose the myth. And I do think as well that any talk of a free allowance for water is a gross insult to the tax-paying public in this country, because, as Deputy Pringle said earlier, we know that Irish people do pay for water. That's an acknowledged situation in the derogation that we got in terms of the EU, and that we just pay for our water in a different way through our central taxation. And it is offensive to suggest that we don't do that. There's been no clarity on this idea of the free allowance of water, but any of the figures which have been spoken about really are indicative of an amount that would just about give the average household the opportunity to maybe flush the toilet and wash the dishes, and they would be lucky if they even got a shower out of it. So I don't think that that's really any great way forward or anything. In conclusion, Cathaoirleach, because we don't have the time, is I think this government really hasn't learned the lessons from your previous attempts to introduce water charges in the 80s and in the 90s, where you were met with absolutely massive oppositions in the counties, the length and breadth of this country. And obviously when there was an attempt to reintroduce water charges in the 90s in the 3 Dublin local authorities, such was the opposition that it forced the abolition of water charges for the whole country. And at that time, because it was such an emotive issue, the law was changed to stop the government from disconnecting water supply without going to court. This bill I think, and I'd like the Minister to answer this, proposes to remove this delimiting power and again threatens with the ability to go and disconnect somebody's water supply in order to facilitate, in reality, the continued bailout of bankers, bondholders and so on, which is what is behind all of this, because certainly public services will not benefit from this. This is part of an overall neoliberal agenda that's been foisted on workers throughout Europe, privatisation of essential public services and fleecing ordinary people to pay debts that were never ours in the first place.
Thank you. Deputy Kine, you have a 20-minute slot now for government speakers. There are 2 of you in the chamber. In other words, you have 10 minutes each, unless some of your colleagues arrive in.
Well, I'll take 5 minutes anyway, and 20 might try and contact.
And then 15 minutes for Deputy Lawler. Okay.
Yeah. Thanks a minute, Mr. Chairman. Could I, first of all, I suppose, be the first government backbencher to officially welcome the announcement by An Taoiseach and the Minister of Finance and commend them for their great work and efforts over a long number of months and over the last couple of years to get a deal on the promissory notes. And certainly a great next step for the country. I'm delighted to speak on this important topic, and I suppose it goes without saying that few things are as important in this world than the constant availability of clean water. I think of all the technological innovations of the 20th century, the introduction of clean water supply into family homes and businesses was one of the most, if not the most significant. Such is our understanding of the importance of clean water for health, for sanitation, for food production, and for a multitude of other things, that charitable organisations exist with the single purpose of securing clean water supplies in less developed nations. In Ireland today, we take the availability of clean water for granted. We forget the process through which collected water goes through before it reaches our homes, safe for human consumption. However, on rare occasions, an event will suddenly bring to mind how precious the supply is and how easily it can be disrupted. And being from Galway, I recall vividly, as do many other people, the cryptosporidium crisis in the city and county, which effectively shut down large parts of the water supply network from, I think, around St Patrick's Day up to the Galway races at the end of July, where people were advised not to drink water in Galway at the time. That had a huge negative effect, obviously to householders, also to the wider economy, with many businesses suffering, obviously tourism being such an important part of the economy of Galway. Cryptosporidium was chiefly caused by a lack of investment in the water and wastewater network, and government failed the people both at local and at a central level. And we can trace the chronic lack of investment with the corresponding waste through leakage of treated water to the failure of the national government to introduce a stable funding source of local government following the removal of domestic rates in the 1970s. Thankfully, the cryptosporidium crisis has been consigned to the past, and the present Minister for the Environment, Phil Hogan, working with the Minister for State for Responsibility for New Era, Minister Fergus O'Dowd, has undertaken in a relatively short period of time a major investment programme within Galway. For example, an upgrade of the Dáil water treatment plant has ensured a quality supply of water for Galway City and its environs, and a new reservoir at Tunnabrucky, which serves the city and its environs, is under construction and well advanced. We also have seen, obviously, the city's Mutton Island treatment plant developed over a number of years, as well as a 20 million investment for water and wastewater projects in Connemara as well. To fund this, however, a new model is required, and part of the funding is coming from the European Investment Bank, which works for member states and recognises that whatever the economic climate, investment in water supply network is crucial. However, this bill goes further to ensure a new continuous stream of investment in our water services. It creates Uisce Éireann, or Irish Water, a new subsidiary of Bord Gáis Éireann, which will coordinate the delivery of water services. So rather than having dozens of different authorities doing things differently, different things in different ways, we'll have one clear point of responsibility for the provision of our water supply nationwide. Obviously, the country has suffered over a long number of years from an historic investment in water. When I joined the local authority in 2004, we received a list under the Water Service Investment Programme which detailed every town and village in the county and a year beside it when works were going to take place. And then we'd go in a year later and there'd be very little done, and another list, and so on and so on. We've seen some investment, in fairness, by the last government.
5 minutes, you have 1 moment.
Yes,
1 minute left.
Keep going. In fairness, there has been a lot of work and investment under the previous government, and this has thankfully been continued under Minister Hogan. Deputy Daly commented about leaks, and obviously we have a history of leaks across the country. However, there has been, I think, in the city and county, great strides over the last period of time within the present structure to combat the issues of leaks. We've seen an investment from Minister Hogan recently in relation to leak detection and a district metering programme within Galway City, for example, to create different districts so that the local authority could better know where leaks are occurring and to sort them out. Overall, I'd like to welcome this bill. I'd like to welcome the fact that it will give a clearer, I think, investment opportunities in terms of our water and wastewater services into the future. There's a lot of other things that people